Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Bodybuilding Mountain. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about, well, it shouldn't be a surprise to you, about unconventionality. Is that a word? You know, just doing things in an unconventional way, and how sometimes that can provide you with some results that you've been looking for, because if you stick to the way you've been taught, sometimes that can limit you, right? So of course, obviously, you want to learn how to do exercises properly, or at least in a way that they don't injure you. And you distribute the forces properly on the muscles and not necessarily overextend or tweak the joints and all that stuff. So there is an argument for saying, you know, getting inventive for the sake of being inventive is not necessarily good either. But there's a few things that I would say about exercises that might hold you back, right? So for instance, say, let's just take the tricep kickback. The other day, I found myself doing something different than, say, what I would have done back in the day. And usually during a tricep kickback, your shoulders stay square, you bend over, and then you kick the triceps back with the dumbbell, right? But what I did was that I leaned on the dumbbell rack and I just went to the side and propped my arm against my rib cage and then extended the tricep, and I got a much better tricep pump from doing the exercise that way, and a much more tricep fatigue and burn. Because what was happening was, when I rested my arm on the rib cage, I wasn't using my rear delt isometrically, so that way I could concentrate more on that tricep. So if I stay doing them conventionally, what I notice is that my rear delt gets sometimes more work than the tricep in the process, because the rear delt does play an isometric role in holding the arm in place. Look at all those exercise sticks. Wow. So that's one primary example of just making a small adjustment in an exercise might provide you with the results you've been looking for. You know, the other thing I see is that people will do pull-ups and they're stuck on, oh, I got to do pull-ups with my body weight, even if it might be a bit challenging for them, or they're not warming up properly, so they're just going right into the pull-up. And they might be getting some sort of problems from that. Maybe they're not getting their lat because they're just trying to muscle themselves up in any way possible, not necessarily trying to activate the back. But one thing you could do is what I've been doing just for lighter weights and higher amounts of repetitions. I've been doing my pull-ups off the squat rack. So I have the bar lowered, and then I basically still stand in a squat position, hold onto the bar, and then do pull-ups, but I'm not actually pulling up my leg weight as much because they're resting on the ground, right? I'm not using my quads or my hams to push myself up at all. They're just hanging limp. But at the same time, it does make the chin up a little bit lighter and therefore changes the angle of attack, which is really what's important. Sometimes you just want to change the angles up or reduce the tension so that way you can get more repetitions and play around with those rep ranges, right? So you can have your body weight chin up day where you're doing your full body weight, or even weighted chin ups if you want. But then you can also have these other days where you do lighter weight and push into a different technique or a different burn, and sometimes that can provide some new results, right? So it's not really a conventional way of doing it, but it can be a way that you might get some extra results. Or because of the lighter weight, you start to be able to play with the angle a bit and really activate the lats instead of just doing a bicep dominant pull-up, right? So that's something you can play around with. Now, another exercise where I find there's a massive, or always has been a real massive problem, is the bicep curl. I find a lot of people get really obsessed with the bar going all the way up and all the way down, or the bar or the dumbbell, you know, the dumbbell going all the way up and all the way down, and that's how you curl the arm. And if you don't do that, then you're not doing the bicep curl properly. Then of course you get the other people that say, hey, keep the elbows back and curl the arm, and that way you isolate the bicep, and they kind of police it in that way. They say, hey, you're not doing a proper bicep curl unless your elbows don't move at all. And so I'm on to doing both techniques from time to time, but to say one is right and the other one's absolutely wrong is going to be dependent really on how your shoulders are sitting in the joint, genetically where your insertions are, and whether you are feeling the muscle belly hitting failure or not. Now, what I've been doing lately is I've been doing lighter weights, but I've been doing incline curl, but just keeping the elbows back and just curling the arm to here. Just curling at about 90 degrees of the elbow, right? And this way, I don't bring in the shoulder, because once I start bringing the arms forward, I start to notice that my shoulders start to burn more than the biceps, and I want the biceps to hit failure. So even though I might get some extra tension on the biceps once in a while here, I notice once again the shoulders start coming in so much, so it's better for me to keep the elbows back. And sometimes just slightly or externally rotate just a little bit, just a tiny bit, not much, just a little bit, and that can help keep the tension on the belly. Now, if I was indoctrinated into one way to do the incline, right, I might be forced to keep my elbows back and then come all the way forward, right, when I come up. Like I might get indoctrinated into that technique. Or maybe it's a technique where I keep the elbows back, but maybe I'm one of these people that feels that when I bring the elbows forward just a bit and finish off the curl, I get a better bicep pump from that, right? So you want to take your indoctrination and adjust based on what your body is telling you. It's not always about sticking to the same way you've been taught, because sometimes that can really cause problems. And also there's lots of leaps of logic that a lot of people don't take into account. For instance, the squat is one of the worst exercises for people to be indoctrinated into. They all think that everybody's supposed to squat the exact same way, regardless of bodily dimensions, right? But if you see me squat, you'll notice that I squat with my ass way back. I'm barely 90 degrees at the knee, but I feel that that's the best way to keep the weight over my center of gravity and keep the least amount of tension on the knees. But if I do a goblet squat, you can see right here, I'll show you a clip of my goblet squat. You'll see that I'm parallel to the floor, that I can go really deep, because where the center of gravity is changes depending on where the weight is on your body. So it isn't as much of a flexibility issue as it is about how your weight is distributed, and your bodily dimensions contribute to that. Like how long is your lower back in comparison to your femurs, like these ratios and stuff. This makes a huge difference. So it's not always just flexibility, 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 right? So one person will see a guy do a goblet squat as deep as I did there and say, oh, all normal squats should be the same depth and stuff. But the truth is that the forces are being distributed much differently for each person depending on how they're built. So that's why I believe wholeheartedly in adjusting your technique based on your bodily dimensions and finding out where are you feeling that tension. And if you're getting injured, that is definitely not the right technique for you. That's really the bottom line. So yeah, that's what I want to say, is just break your own dogma, break your own brainwashing around certain exercises, and you'll notice that you're going to get a lot more results. I've had lots of guys on this channel say they adjusted a technique, just sometimes it's changing the range of motion a bit, or just one little tweak in an exercise here and there, and all of a sudden a massive amount of results come. So sometimes you're hitting a plateau because you're not doing the exercise properly in order to generate the most amount of tension in the muscle in that area with said exercise. You might be distributing it amongst a lot of the, let's just say, the connective tissue and then multiple muscles, but maybe the muscles that don't need the tension are getting more of it than the muscles that do, right? So this is bodybuilding, right? You're trying to distribute those forces accordingly and get the desired effect. Mountain. So yeah, I hope this helps you out in your training. Thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalbodybuilding.com, and thanks to the patron supporters, and take care for now. Oh yeah, guys, if you haven't checked out my podcast yet, make sure you check it out. The link is in the description. Make sure you take the time and show up to my Patreon page. Mountain.